But as of this week, the ECB job advert for the new managing director of men's cricket has gone live. It, of course, is replacing Ashley Giles, who was fired after the Ashes. Sir Andrew Strauss is doing that job on a temporary basis at the moment. He's also putting in place the review of the future of the game in England. And I caught up with him earlier this week to go through his grand plans.
Well, Andrew, there's a lot going on at the moment. So should we start with the managing director, which has been announced today, or at least the applications are open today?
Yes, exactly. So good that process is underway, and there's a slight ticking clock in terms of the start of the international summer in the beginning of June, and we want to obviously get that person in position, and then it will be their decision as to around the coach or coaches as well, which hopefully also will be in position by the start of the summer. But as you can see, there's a bit of time pressure for us to make that happen.
Yeah, well, that's a lot. So the new managing director, who isn't here yet, is going to have a big hand in appointing the coach.
Yeah, he has to, because it's going to be his team, right? And so he's got to look at how he wants to sort of structure the England high performance department, if you want to put it that way, and whether he goes down the single coach or the two coach model, I suppose. And then he's got to have his team. He's got to have the people that he feels can work with him and has a similar philosophy, and et cetera. So yeah, it's very much the sort of first piece in the jigsaw is getting the new managing director in place, and then things can hopefully happen quite quickly from that point of view.
What sort of person are you looking for, Andrew? Are you looking for someone who sort of gets English cricket? It's like an Englishman, I suppose, obviously. Or are you open to an overseas appointment?
Well, I've always been uneasy with the idea of just saying, if you're overseas, you can't do this role. I always think you're trying to think about who's the best person for the position. Look, that role, that managing director role, ultimately you're leading high performance men's cricket, and so there are all sorts of different elements to that role. One of which is doing what we're doing here. Like there's a sort of a communication element. There are obviously strong decisions that need to be made at times around players and coaches, and there's an influencing element, which is influencing the game and making sure the domestic game's aligned with both England's ambitions and that there's good strong communication right the way through the pathway. So there's a lot of strands to this role, and we're looking for someone who's able to kind of do all the various elements of the role.
But it's a huge challenge, isn't it? If accepting where English cricket is at the moment as well, to throw into that, it's a big job.
Yeah, but what a great time to get involved. I think it's very rare you have the opportunity to start with a blank sheet of paper, and I think this person's going to have that. And one thing I know for sure is that despite all the doom and gloom around English cricket, there are a lot of good cricketers out there, and I think we're not going to become brilliant overnight, but I think we've got a lot of the raw ingredients in place already, quite frankly.
To take you back to here, West Indies, 12, 13 years ago, same situation really, when you and Andy Flower were both temporary, weren't you, in positions really? At that time, a lot of unsettled atmosphere about English cricket. I mean, do you see any correlation?
Parallels, yeah, huge parallels, and I think at that time, I mean, the team that emerged out of that went on to be number one in the world, 2.5 years later, which came much quicker than perhaps we thought it would. And especially at that time, we were contending with losing Andrew Flintoff, who was like the talismanic figure and the all-rounder. We couldn't balance the team as a result of his injuries and retirement, and actually what that did was just allow the emergence of other players, and so I think we're in that position right at the moment. We've had a lot of players up till now who haven't nailed down their spots in the team, and so every time they've been walking out either to bat or bowl, it's been like they've been on trial, and that's a very hard mindset to perform consistently. Hopefully with Crawley getting runs and Bairstow, really playing nicely in that number 6 position, some of the pieces of the jigsaw are coming together.
And the second part of this then is this review that's going on. I mean, we've talked a lot about the Red Ball reset, which is a nice sound bite, isn't it? But in reality, what's happening with that now? Yeah,
so I think while a lot of the focus post the Ashes has been A, on Red Ball cricket, and B, on the domestic structure, I think this project's broader than that, and our ambition, of course, has to be the best team in all formats. I think we've got the the ability to do that. And in order for that to happen, we've got to look at the whole kind of high performance system, and domestic cricket and the competition structure is part of that, but it's not the only part of it. So it's a slightly broader project than maybe people made it out to be. And of course, whatever your focus on red ball cricket, it's like a Rubik's Cube that affects white ball cricket. And so you can't look at the two in isolation. We've got to look at them together. I think it's a really exciting time for us to start looking at this stuff. I think there is a general will and ambition there for the game in our country to move forward. I feel like we've been not had our head stuck in the sand. That's probably unfair, but the game around us has been moving very quickly. You look at the rise of domestic T20 cricket around the world. Our players are playing a lot of cricket abroad, our domestic players, not even our international players, in the winter. And so it's time to look up and go, what is our role in all of this, and how do we both protect our own system, but also enhance that system from outside influence. So the time is right. I mean, we don't have a moment to lose.
No. And how radical do you think it'll be? And as I say, English cricket is notorious because of the way that it's structured with the 18 counties. Can you actually see the game itself voting for radical change?
Well, we will see. And I think my argument is, if we are genuinely ambitious about being the best team in all formats, we've got to accept that we've never really had a system that has produced that. And I'm not talking about the domestic game, I'm just talking about all the way through. The results don't lie. We've been number one in the world in Test cricket for 12 months in the last 42 years. That's the truth. And so I get the feeling that small incremental change isn't going to make the difference that we need. So I think we need to be bold and ambitious, and that doesn't, I think we've got to trust the process to see what that means, actually, because I think people jump to, well, that means less counties or whatever, and I don't think it necessarily does mean that, to be honest with you. I think we've got to trust that process.
But could it mean using, it's hypothetical in a way, but could it mean using those teams that have been separated from the system, that the 100 teams, franchises, people might call them, they're not ECB owned, but could they be used in a first class structure?
Well, I think you're jumping to solutions, and that's a dangerous thing for us to do. I think, as I said, like, if you're looking at a high performance system, it feels to me like there are a lot of levers you can pull, and about effectively how do we encourage the right skills to be developed in our country. Genuine fast bowling, match winning spin, ability for batters to bat for long periods in Test cricket, etc., etc. And then you've got to think, well, what are the various elements that we need in order to make that happen? And the domestic structure is definitely one of them. I think that the general culture and environment in English cricket, I think we've got to look at that and say, are we genuinely as professional as we can be? And if not, what are the areas that we can improve? So there's a lot to it, alongside, of course, all those sort of tiny detail tactical things around balls and pitches and point structures and all that sort of stuff as well.
It's interesting because, last thought I think, but the way the summer is structured at home, it's so packed. But there's television contracts involved in that. I mean, it's not going to be an easy business. Somehow, not dismantling it, but at least that blank sheet of paper that you talked about, starting from that point.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's difficult to start with a blank sheet of paper.
I think that's true. When push comes to shove, right at the end of this process, there are going to be some constraints in place which we need to accept. But I think if you start with those constraints in place, really, the project can only offer very slight changes, and I don't think that is what the game is calling for at the moment. I get the feeling that the game, whether you're a county CEO or chair or director of cricket or an England coach, I think there's an ambition there that the status quo is not where we need to be, and we need to move to a different place.
And finally, the last match in Antigua, a grim pitch, but you'd have been encouraged, I think, by the way that England went about it.
I think so. Just in terms of approach, I thought it was excellent. Those pitches can be very energy and morale sapping, can't they? Right. And so to see the levels of energy, the level of spirit in the camp, I think, we were ambitious on the final day to try and force a result, and we did as much as we could do, I think, in a lot of ways. And ultimately, from where we were in the Ashes, I sensed a different mindset, full stop, and that it's one game, and you can't read too much into it. And but the key with everything is just starting to get the ball rolling, a bit of momentum, a feeling like we're moving forward, and even on the batting front to have 300s, to get some decent scores on the board. That is certainly a step forward.
Well, that was Sir Andrew Strauss with me. Dean, are you expecting to see a lot of change and quickly? I mean, there's a lot going on in this review process, isn't there? It's all a bit confusing, I think.
Well, yeah, Sir Andrew Strauss has certainly set his sights on, he said, something bold and radical when it comes to sort of the domestic structure and high performance structure. But more immediately than that is the managing director of men's cricket. That's the first
pressing in
appointment.
Terms of time.
Absolutely, and he said that he wants and expects to have a head coach in place by the first test in June. I think 2nd of June is the first test. So the managing director has to appoint that person as well. So there is a bit to do, and time is of the essence. But I think also Andrew Strauss is, when he's making these appointments will have a pretty good idea of the direction that he feels things should go in. So I think there will be an element of singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of things like whether it's one or two coaches. I think 2 coaches seems to be the way now, one for white ball, one for red. I mean, when you look at the schedule, when you look at how much cricket is coming up and how the white ball team just kind of buttresses their matches up against the red ball team, it is nigh on impossible for one person to do the lot. So we'll see that. I think we'll see a return to a selection panel, which was a change by Ashley Giles. So there are things that need to be done, and I think Strauss wants to get that sorted, pretty quickly over the next couple of months, and then really take on the big project, I guess, which is the high performance, trying to align the domestic game, the counties, and the academy and the pathways, and the England team all singing from the same hymn sheet on that.
Which he wants by the start of next summer, which is again, that's I mean, 23. I mean, even that time scale is really pressing it. If you think what they've got to put in place before that, and he talked about starting with a blank sheet of paper, but it doesn't seem that that's possible. There's so much already in place. Television contractors, so many stakeholders, the 18 counties and everything else. It's going to be very interesting to see where this one goes. What I did like was him saying that he feels that it has to be done now. That has to be changed now.
I mean, that's his view. That the way things panned out in Australia and the Ashes, and the way that the trend has panned out over a period of time. I think he used the stat that England have played 65 tests overseas in the last 10 years, have only won 17 of them, and that's no basis for which to become the best team in the world. So it's a big job and a big review and a big report, however you want to call it. But we've been here before. There have been many reviews, many reports, and in the end, it's very difficult to get everything that you want through. So we shall see.